So I would like to give the floor now to our first speaker, Damien Beillouin. Damien Beillouin is from Cirad and is actually in the French West Indies. So I'm very grateful for you, for giving this talk during the night for you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to this presentation. It's an honor to present my work and to present the work of my colleagues. So I will now share my screen, and so I will talk about the effect of crop diversification strategy at a global scale on the ecosystem services.
It is not yet on screen. Voilà.
Oh,
okay. Now it is in the room. Okay.
A few second delay. Sorry for that. So yes, crop diversification is now a topic in science and also in politics. For example, the Common Agricultural Policy speaks a lot about crop diversification, also the Green Deal, but there's a lot of misunderstanding, lots of maybe not clear about the benefits of crop diversification. If we can give a global definition, crop diversification is a practice that aims to include a wide range of practices aiming at incorporating crop diversity across multiple spatial and temporal scales. For example, if we mix in the same field different species, different crops, the same species, it's called cultivation. But if one of the species is not of the crop is not of the same species, it's called intercropping. Now, if we mix a crop on a perennial crop, it's called agroforestry. We can also mix together, not in space, but in time, different crops. And so here it's called crop rotation. On a different way, another way, for example, is to mix the crops that are not aiming directly at produce biomass. For example, it could be a plant in the next to the field to protect for erosion, for preserve water quality. So here we see there is lots of different ways to mix different crop species to aim at reach crop diversification. And it could be one reason that it's difficult for scientists and for politics to have a good and global understanding of what is and what are the performance of crop diversification. Another difficulty is that there is a lot of studies about these crop diversification strategies. For example, since 2 or 3 decades, there is more than 1,000 experimental studies that are focused on these particular types of crop diversification. The plot on the left of the slide shows the number of meta-analyses, the green curve, on the number of primary studies, the orange, that are focused on this particular topic. We can see there is an exponential increase in the number of studies available in the scientific literature. And the studies are focused in different regions, particular regions of the world, and it's shown on the map on the right. So each individual particular studies focus on some specific pedoclimatic conditions, and so that it might be difficult for scientists or for decision makers to have a global view of the global overall effect of crop diversification. And to give an example of a study, I hope you see my nice slide now. I will take an example of primary studies. For example, the study of Egli 2 years ago, published 2 years ago. On this study, focused on the effect of crop rotation on yield in particular regions, that is Italy. And here is an example of the plot we can see in the paper. It's a very interesting paper, very interesting plot, but it might be complicated to understand for scientists or for decision makers. It by 1 hour or 2 hours to fully understand the paper and fully understand what are the advantages of this particular crop rotation strategy. And so I present this is only to say that it will be very difficult for scientists and even more for decision makers to have time to focus in each study and to have a global overview. Fortunately, we have methods that are useful to synthesize all this type of knowledge. On this method is called meta-analysis. For example, I will present here meta-analysis, rapidly present meta-analysis of Cirad and al, published in 2017. And this meta-analysis focused on presenting the benefits or non-benefits of including legumes in crop rotation, and focus on is there a yield benefit of including legumes in crop rotation. And Cirad and al synthesize all existing evidence in the literature and then synthesize and present this type of graph, this type of plots, And so in this plot, we can see in the abscissa the different species of legumes they find, they have information in the literature. On the ordinate, the yield ratio. Otherwise, in other words, the yield ratio presents either benefits of including legumes in crop rotation on the yield of the following crops. If the yield ratio is over 1, we can say yes, there is a yield benefits. If the ratio is below 1, we can say there is no benefits. The mean effect is presented by a point, and the confidence interval is presented by a bar. And so this type of plot can synthesize a lot of knowledge, a lot of information. This study, for example, synthesizes more than 100 and 200, I don't remember exactly, primary studies. So it's very interesting, a very practical way to synthesize global numerous articles. But the problem we can see now is that there is now a lot of meta-analysis. And so on the meta-analysis focus on particular subject, particular question. Here, for example, the meta-analysis focus only on crop rotation. And as we saw before, there is different types of crop diversification strategies. There is also agroforestry, there was also intercropping, there was also associated plant species, and so on. And so it's still difficult with this type of results to have a very global overview of the whole effect of crop diversification on all ecosystem services. And that was the focus on our study. And our study focused on two main questions. The two main questions were, what are the quantitative effects of all type of crop diversification on all other ecosystem services? And the second question was, what are the knowledge gaps on what are the knowledge gaps in the scientific literature on this particular subject. So we applied a method, a conventional method, that is also meta-analysis. We search in the internet on the literature search some various databases, for example, Web Science, Scholar, Ovid, and others, all possible or existing meta-analysis on crop diversification. And we identify more than 100 possible potential studies relevant to our criteria. And then we apply a strict selection step to identify only relevant meta-analysis, really focusing on crop diversification, presenting quantitative results on the paper available. So we ended up with 95 meta-analyses, synthesizing more than 500 experiments. These 95 meta-analyses were the basis of our work, and we precisely characterize all these 95 meta-analyses. We characterize the global information, the metadata. We characterize the quality of this meta-analysis, because it's very important to have precise analysis of quality when we synthesize our numerous studies. We also extracted all the effect size. The effect size, for example, in the plot of Cirad, the ratio of the benefit of crop diversification. And we also extracted all the primary studies, so that we have a lot of information that is useful for us to calculate a global overall mean estimate of the overall effect of crop diversification. And I will directly present the results. And here is the main results of our research. Is the forest plot I have presented before, but I will maybe present a little more. And so in the abscissa, you have the relative ratio in log scale. And so it's a benefit of crop diversification over non-diversified system. If the ratio is over 0 here, because it's a log scale, it means that the crop diversification has a benefits on ecosystem services. If the ratio is below 0, it means that crop diversification has no benefit on the particular ecosystem services. The ecosystem services are presented in ordinates. For example, they are associated biodiversity, pest and disease, water quality, and so on, production, product quality. In the parentheses, we can see the number of meta-analyses we gather and we synthesize, and the second number is the number of experiments. So here we present a very global overview of the literature. For example, for associated biodiversity, we synthesize more than 14 meta-analyses, synthesizing more than a very global scale. We synthesize a lot of primary knowledge. And in the plot, the mean effect is presented by point. The confidence interval are presented by bars. And we will now analyze the global overview, the global information of this plot. we can see that most of the ecosystem services are improved by crop diversification. And we can see that both production and associated biodiversity are increased. That means that crop diversification is a good solution. It could be a good solution for both improving the production and ecosystem services. So it could be a very a way to sustainable, intensified agricultural production. On the second information we can have in this plot is that we have a lot of variability. For example, here the confidence interval are sometimes very wide, very one. So there is a lot of variability in the benefits of crop diversification, and that's what we are now focusing on. I will present the next slide. And here is detail for three chosen ecosystem services, that is associated biodiversity, agricultural production, and soil quality, of the detailed effect of the different strategy of crop diversification. We detail the effect by agroforestry, crop rotation, cover crops, intercropping, and cultivar mixture. It's the same type of plot as before, so the mean point represents the mean effect, and the bar represents the confidence interval. And here we can say that among the different types of crop diversification, agroforestry seems very interesting to have the most beneficial effect on associated biodiversity, agricultural production, and soil quality. On the contrary, cultivar mixture presents the lowest benefits on all the strategy and have most of the time null or negative effect on the three indicators. So we can diversification does not yield in the same results. It's very important to have a very focus on the type of practice or agricultural practices. And if we focus on agroforestry, that we saw that was interesting, we now focus on all type of ecosystem services, that is water use, water quality, soil quality, profitability, production, and so on. We can see that most or all the ecosystem services are improved by agroforestry. That is, agroforestry is really maybe a very good solution to improve the sustainability of agriculture. And then we can now go a bit further on, because agroforestry is still a wide range of practices. We can mix trees and crops in different ways in fields. And here we detail different ways of mixing the trees and crops. And for example, we have parklands, we have silver system, we have silvopasture, we have different types of system, and we detail the effects on, for example, here associated biodiversity, agricultural production, and soil quality of the different way of mixing trees and crops. And you can see here also there is a variable performance. We can, the farmers with this type of result can choose, or the politician can choose the best practices to improve, to promote. Here I focus on the different type of crop species that we are using the different crop strategy. And here we detail the different species for 9 regions of the world, for example, North America, South Asia, and Africa. And we can see that most of the diversification practices are based on a few crop species, mainly maize and rice and wheat. They are the main crop species used for diversified crop systems. And for example, legumes or minor species are very less studied, and there is also some regional particularities. For example, we can see that coffee and cocoa is well studied in South Asia, apple in East Asia, and for example, coffee in Africa. But the main message here is that the crop diversification is maybe not so diverse, and maybe most of species are the conventional use species in agricultural production now. And I will now present the answer to the second question, the knowledge gaps. Here in the matrix, you can see the different ecosystem services in the ordinates. And in the abscissa, we can see the different type of crop diversification. The cells represent the number of meta-analyses, and the number, in parentheses and below, represent the number of experiments. So we can see here that in some there is some cells with a high number of metallases. That is a subject that is highly studied by the scientific community. But there is also a lot of cells are empty cells. That is, there is a lot of knowledge gaps that the non-metallases are studied yet. And for example, some interesting things is that, for example, we did not have a lot of studies about the variety of crop production. And it could be very interesting for farmers to have a regular production, a stable production, but in the scientific community, we cannot yet, at the global scale, does crop diversification allow to have a more stable crop production. Another thing of interest is the economic part. We also have very few meta-analysis about the economic benefits of crop diversification. So we can have now no way to say the farmers crop diversification benefits or not the revenue. On here are details of our publication. I will also we have also produced a Shiny application that is linked in blue here. We can you can explore. You can it's all the plots I presented are presented sorry in the internet platform. I can explore the different effects of different crop diversification or the different outcomes on all data available. So I will stop here now. I will please to answer your question if you have any. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Damien. So we have time for questions, and there are Roland. So you can repeat the question or.
Oui. I give the floor to Charlotte Navarro for a question about agroforestry. Charlotte.
I read the question and sometimes. How we can explain the large differences for agroforestry? Does this mean that there are agroforestry systems that do not perform well in terms of impact of ecosystem services on biodiversity? If so, which one? Conversely, which agroforestry system performs the best? Yes, so we saw that there is lots of variability in the performance of the different crop diversification strategy and also the different agroforestry strategy. On here, it's descriptive, only a descriptive study, so we have not all the factors explaining the variability of the performance. We gather all potential moderators of performance, for example, the soil, climate conditions, agricultural practices, but it's difficult at the very global scale to have a very precise conclusion to this fact, because there is a lot of variability, for example, in agricultural production, in agricultural practices. So I think it's more a second step of the study that we can answer later.
Thank you very much for your answer, Damien. I would like to know if there will be the list of the meta-analysis treated that will accompany your article.
Yes, we have in the Shiny app I present. I can maybe put the link in the chat. We have I said all the primary information because we are keen to have open science. So all information we gather are openly available for scientists, decision makers, and everybody. And in the Shiny app, we can also have a quick look and you choose the quantification you are interested of, the ecosystem you are interested of, and you can all have information. So it's a very open, I hope, user-friendly interface. So I will put the link in the chat afterward.
Thank you very much, Damien, and bravo for this presentation.
Thank you.
So we have a question in the room here, so Philippe first. Maybe.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Oui, pas super bien, mais je vais.
Oui, peut-être.
It may be easier. So I have a question concerning one of your first slides regarding the number of experiments, and on the world map, China is colored in red. So indeed, you have a big volume of experiments. But two questions on that issue. Did you experience the language barrier, or could you overcome that? And secondly, did you use the Big Earth data project that is developed by China?
So the answer to the first question, in the different meta-analyses or meta-syntheses we saw indeed that China and USA are the most important countries that provide science. It's a well-known fact, but yes, most of the studies come from USA and China. And yes, there could be a language barrier, for example, also for other languages. But as we focus on meta-analysis, each meta-analysis can synthesize Chinese, for example, literature. And after that, the meta-analysis is published in English, so we have access to the information that we could not read directly. And I think that's my answer for the first question. On the second question, is no, we don't have analyzed this type of platform, this type of platform.
Okay, thank you.
Is there another question in the room or on the? Because I have one question also on one of your first slides. Where there was a list of impacts of crop diversification. And I was surprised to see that the average impact on yield stability was null. Because generally, so maybe it is a belief and not a reality, we hear that mixing genotypes may not be always the top producing, but is more an advantage for stability. And on this slide, we see the opposite, because we have some positive, a positive average impact on yield and no impact on stability. So how did you comment this? Or?
Yes, I agree. Ecological theory suggests that, yes, increasing the crop diversity or the natural diversity in natural ecosystem increase the stability of the system. But as I said, there is not so many studies in agronomic fields on this particular topic, this particular effect of stability. So here the effect, I think we cannot totally trust the effect because there is not lots of study in this particular effect. So the confidence interval is wide. On the null effect, it might be linked with the knowledge gaps. On one of my conclusion is we need more research on this particular topic on yield stability. So for now, yes, I was surprised also to see a null effect, but we cannot conclude definitely on this particular effect.
So if not, I have another one. When you mentioned different, there were different species of plants and also different varieties. My question is about the choice of these varieties within a species. Is it described in the publication? Are there standard commercial varieties, or do you observe mix of old varieties or new varieties? My idea is about the BRCs, when we have a range of varieties which are not used anymore, for instance. So is there a perspective to mix old and new, or actually what is the mix currently tested?
So yes,
in these studies?
Yes, in the different meta-analyses, for example, on cultivar mixture, there is some studies focusing on how to mix the different cultivar mixture. For example, we can aim to increase the physical diversity of the mixture, to increase the barrier effects for pests and disease. We can aim to increase the genetic diversity. And there is some meta-analyses focusing in particular on this type of questions. Here, as we present only the global effect, we only present all way to mix different crops, different species together, but we have details in the database on the impact of the different choice to mixing the species. So yes, we can add some information about this in the database. I'm not sure I've answered all the question. Maybe the second part of the question I've not answered. I don't remember exactly the second part of the question. Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, there are no other questions in the room or in the question or chat. Even if there is no mistake, no question in the chat. Okay, well, thank you very much, Damien, and sorry for the time schedule. And I hope we will hear more also in the future on the impact of mixing genotypes for agricultural production. So thank you very much, and have a good end of the night.
Thank you.